Alien girl refused help until the human walked away. Then she whispered the words he waited for. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character, Evan Miller, as the wind clawed across the broken dome above him, carrying fine dust that glittered like cold ash under the flickering lights. The maintenance scanner on his wrist kept flashing yellow, its soft beeps drowned by the low hum of stressed metal. He adjusted the strap on his pack and stepped deeper into the restricted zone, boots crunching over cracked floor panels that radiated leftover heat from a recent ion surge. That was when he saw her. A silhouette first, slender, unmoving, leaning against a half-collapsed support beam. As he came closer, the flicker of the emergency lights revealed smooth violet skin catching the light like brushed silver. She held herself upright through sheer will, jaw set, eyes sharp even in exhaustion. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a quiet tremor. Evan lifted his empty hands slowly. "You're hurt," he said, voice steady, barely raised above the soft rattle of loose metal. The alien girl didn't answer. Her gaze locked onto him, guarded, measuring. He could see a faint shiver along her arms despite her effort to appear untouched by the cold draft. "Let me take a look," Evan offered gently. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere. Just help." For a moment she didn't blink, as if the very idea of accepting help was foreign. Then she turned her face away, eyes narrowing at the floor. "Leave," she said, the word low but unbroken. "I don't need you." Evan wasn't surprised. Pride had a tone he recognized instantly. He crouched anyway, keeping distance, letting her see every movement before he made it. The scanner at his wrist chirped again, picking up her dropping temperature. She needed warmth, shelter, at least a stabilizer patch, but he didn't push. "All right," he murmured, rising back to his feet. "If that's what you want." He reached into his pack, pulled out a portable thermal unit, activated it, and set it gently on the floor within her reach. She didn't look at it, didn't look at him. He nodded once, more to himself than to her, then turned away and began walking back through the drifting haze. His footsteps were soft, swallowed by the wind slipping through fractured seams. 10 steps. 15. The distance between them stretched thin, like a thread pulling taut. Then, barely louder than the hum of the failing lights, he heard it. Evan, a whisper. Fragile, reluctant, but unmistakably calling him. He stopped. For a second, he closed his eyes, letting the sound settle into him like a spark catching on cold embers. When he turned, she had her head bowed slightly, eyes lifted just enough to meet his. Vulnerability flickered there, not surrender, but choice. He walked back toward her, slow and steady, the light from the thermal unit glowing faintly at their feet as the storm outside pressed against the dome's failing walls. The soft glow from the thermal unit pulsed gently against the fractured walls as Evan knelt beside Liriana again. Up close, her features looked different than they had moments before, no longer sharpened by refusal, but softened by something quieter, almost uncertain. The cold breeze that drifted through the cracked dome brushed against her violet skin, making the silver sheen ripple faintly. Evan adjusted his jacket and draped part of it over her shoulders, careful not to startle her. She did not pull away this time. Instead, her eyes followed the motion, curious and cautious all at once. "You said my name," he said gently, giving her space to speak if she wanted to. Liriana shifted, bracing one hand lightly on the support beam to steady herself. "I misjudged you," she admitted, the words slow, as if unfamiliar. Her voice carried a tone that did not match the cold metal surroundings. Humans usually help because they want something in return. Evan let that sit for a moment. The scanner on his wrist blinked with mild environmental warnings, but he ignored it. The storm outside might worsen, and the dome's systems were unstable. They needed to move soon, but he did not rush her. "Sometimes we help because we do not want someone to be alone in a place like this," he replied. Liriana studied him, her expression unreadable, the faint reflection of the thermal light dancing in her eyes. She shifted her weight again, trying to stand. Evan rose quickly, offering an arm without touching her first. She hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on his forearm for balance. Even through the insulated sleeve, he could feel a faint tremor. As she straightened, the emergency lights flickered overhead, humming weakly. Dust loosened from the fractured ceiling and drifted down like pale sand. The wind outside pressed harder, making the dome's metal ribs creak with unsettling rhythm. "We cannot stay here," Evans said. "The east corridor is still intact. There is a service room with heat and working power cells." Liriana glanced toward the dim hallway leading out of the restricted zone. A long breath escaped her, steadying herself. "Why would you take me there?" "Because you need warmth," Evan answered simply. "And because I said I would help if you asked." The flicker of something, relief, maybe, crossed her features, so subtle it could have been imagined. She tightened her grip on his arm, just slightly. Together, they took the first slow steps toward the corridor. Each footfall echoed softly across the damaged floor, the rhythm accompanied by the distant whistle of wind finding every gap in the dome's skeleton. The hall ahead was dim, lit only by intermittent strips of pale light that buzzed as if half asleep. As they moved, Liriana spoke again, quieter this time. "Among my people, accepting help is seen as weakness." Evan glanced at her. "Among mine, offering help is seen as being human." She considered that, her eyes lowering thoughtfully. The faint warmth from the thermal unit behind them faded as they walked away, replaced by the colder air of the corridor. The lights flickered once more, then steadied into a soft glow. Evan kept his pace matched to hers, patient, steady, letting silence fill the space until she was ready. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a different weight than before. "I called your name because I did not want you to leave me here." Evan's steps slowed. She looked ahead rather than at him, but her grip on his arm remained firm, as if anchoring herself. The hum of the corridor deepened around them, and for a moment, nothing existed but the echo of her confession in the quiet. He nodded once, the gesture small but certain. "Then I am here," he said, "for as long as you need me to be." Liriana breathed out slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction as they continued toward the faint, promising glow of the corridor's safer end. The corridor narrowed as Evan guided Liriana deeper into the east wing, the dim lights above flickering in slow pulses like a heartbeat struggling to stay steady. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint metallic scent from the old ventilation ducts. Liriana's steps were careful but growing steadier, her hand still resting lightly on his arm, not gripping now, simply using him as a reference point. Her silver-violet skin caught the pale glow each time a light strip hummed back to life, creating brief flashes of color against the gray walls. Evan checked the handheld scanner again. The reading showed acceptable oxygen levels ahead, along with residual warmth from a working heater panel. "Almost there," he said softly. Liriana nodded, though her gaze drifted along the walls, studying details as if memorizing every mark and every hum of machinery. "Your structures are strange," she murmured, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "So much metal. So much noise." Evan smiled faintly. "It is not always like this. Some domes are quiet. Some even feel peaceful." She tilted her head. "Peaceful. That is not a word I have known for a long time." They reached the service room doorway. Its panel flickered with a weak blue light. Evan tapped the manual release, and the door slid open with a long, tired hiss. Warm air greeted them, gentle compared to the cold draft outside. A functioning heater glowed along the far wall, surrounded by old tool cabinets and folded tarps. The room was small, only about 10 feet across, but dry and sheltered. Liriana stepped inside slowly, her eyes sweeping the space with practiced caution before she allowed herself to relax even slightly. Evan helped her ease down onto a padded bench near the heater. She extended her legs, exhaling a long, controlled breath as warmth reached her. Her shoulders lowered a little from the guarded position she had held since he found her. "Does this hurt?" Evan asked, crouching beside her. She hesitated before answering. "Not in a way that threatens me," she said, her tone even. "The storm took more strength than I expected. I thought I could cross the dome before the winds shifted." Evan nodded, understanding. The miscalculation all too well. Ion storms were unpredictable, especially in unstable sectors. "You were lucky the dome held as long as it did," he said. "If the surge had been stronger," He caught himself, stopping short of painting the possibility. She noticed the unfinished sentence. Her eyes studied him with that same unreadable depth. You worry for strangers, Evan Miller. He shrugged gently. Someone has to. Her gaze lowered to the scanner on his wrist, watching its lights dance across the screen. Your people measure everything, she said. Numbers, temperature, distance. Do you also measure trust? Evan lowered the device. The heater's hum filled the silence for a moment. Trust is not measured. It is offered, he replied. Liriana absorbed that, her expression softening the slightest bit. My people do not offer trust easily, she said. It is earned through tests. Through certainty. Evan leaned back against the wall beside her, giving her space while staying close enough for her to feel anchored. Maybe this is one of those tests, he said lightly. Her eyes glimmered in the warm light. If it is, she replied, I am not certain who is being tested. The heater hummed steadily, casting a gentle glow across her features. For the first time since he found her beneath the broken dome, Liriana allowed her shoulders to rest fully against the wall, the weight of exhaustion easing from her posture. Evan watched the room settle into a quiet calm, the storm outside muffled by thick walls, the tension between them shifting into something unspoken but steady. Evan, she said softly, you stayed. He nodded once. I did. She looked away, but not to hide. More like someone adjusting to a light they had not expected to feel. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was simply quiet, and for now, that was enough. Warm air from the heater continued to spill gently across the service room, wrapping the small space in a steady hum that softened the tension lingering between Evan and Liriana. Outside the thick walls, the storm pushed against the dome with distant, muffled growls, but in here the world felt smaller, quieter, almost suspended. Evan adjusted one of the older heating panels, tapping its side until the indicator light shifted from orange to a faint green. That should keep this room warm for a while, he said. Liriana watched him. With an expression he could not quite decipher, her silver-violet skin reflecting the glow from the heater in subtle gradients. Your machines respond to you, she said softly, as if they know you. Evan smiled a little. They know when they have been hit the right way. Her head tilted, clearly trying to understand the joke. When she gave a small, reluctant smile in return, it surprised him more than he let show. She drew her knees closer, folding her hands in her lap. For the first time he noticed faint, intricate markings along her wrists, glowing slightly with warmth now that she was closer to the heater. He had seen similar luminescent patterns in technical briefings about her species, but never this close, never this detailed. Those markings, he said gently, do they hurt? She looked down at them as if seeing them through his eyes. No, she replied. They change with temperature. It is a natural adaptation. When the cold touched me earlier, they dimmed. Evan nodded, absorbing the information. They look brighter now. Liriana lifted her wrist closer to the heater. Because you brought me here. It was not said as a compliment, just a simple truth, but something about the honesty of it settled into the air between them. Evan took a slow breath and leaned back against the opposite wall, close but giving her space. The heater hummed, and for a while neither spoke. Then Liriana broke the quiet. You asked nothing of me, she said. Not a name, not a reason, not even trust. I figured you would tell me what mattered when you were ready, Evan said. I did not want to push. Her gaze drifted toward him, sharper now, as if studying the edges of his voice. Among my people, she said, giving someone your name is an opening. A doorway. It means they are allowed to see you. Evan let the words sit. He did not rush her. The storm pressed softly against the dome, reminding them how thin the barrier between safety and chaos truly was. Liriana, she said at last. The sound of her name in her own voice carried a quiet weight, steady and deliberate. She held his gaze, waiting for his reaction. Evan nodded slowly. Liriana, he repeated, careful with every syllable. Something gentle passed through her expression, like a shift in wind. Now you know me, she said quietly. Evan shook his head. Now I know your name. Knowing you is something different. Something that takes time. Liriana considered that, her fingers tracing the glowing lines on her wrist. Time, she echoed, almost to herself. She drew a long, slow breath, the kind someone takes when admitting something they have carried alone for too long. I thought I could cross the dome before the storm changed direction, she said. But I was not traveling. I was leaving. Evan kept his voice steady. Leaving what? Her eyes lowered. Everything I knew. The hum of the heater filled the silence that followed, steady as a heartbeat, grounding them both. When she finally looked up again, her eyes were no longer guarded. They were asking something unspoken, something fragile. Evan held her gaze with the same patience he had offered from the moment he found her. She exhaled softly. I did not expect anyone to follow my voice, she said. Evan nodded once. I did. And in the quiet warmth of that small room, the simple truth between them grew stronger than the storm outside. The heater's low hum steadied the room while the storm outside pressed against the dome in long, distant groans. Lyriana sat with her back against the wall, her glowing wrist markings shifting gently as the warmth seeped into her skin. Evan checked one of the overhead light panels, tapping it twice until it brightened enough to chase away the room's dimness. He glanced toward her, making sure the brightness was not uncomfortable. She blinked slowly, adjusting. It is different, she said. Your light feels calmer. Evan settled onto the bench across from her, wiping dust from his gloves. Just old maintenance tech doing its best, he replied. Kind of like me. A small sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, but close. The kind of sound someone makes after remembering they are allowed to soften. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet between them did not feel empty. It felt like it was holding something fragile, something they were both careful not to disturb. Lyriana finally rested her hands on her knees, her posture slowly opening rather than guarding. When I left my people, she said, choosing each word with care, I thought silence would feel like freedom. But it only felt like losing a voice I did not know I needed. Evan did not answer right away. He let the weight of her words settle. Sometimes silence is only easy when someone is willing to share it with you, he said softly. She studied him, her violet eyes reflecting the soft heater glow. Humans speak strangely, she murmured. You turn small truths into bridges. Evan shrugged lightly. Maybe that is because small truths are what we can carry. He reached into his pack and pulled out a compact hydration flask, setting it on the bench beside her without pushing it toward her. She noticed the gesture, not the object. You always leave space, she said quietly. You do not push. You do not demand. I figure you have had enough of that from the world recently. Evan replied. She traced a finger along the edge of the flask, her touch light, as if testing the gesture rather than the object. Among my people, kindness is often given only after loyalty is proven, she said. It is not something offered freely. Does that make freely given kindness suspicious? Evan asked gently. Lyriana hesitated. It makes it rare. The heater buzzed softly, filling the small room with a warm glow that rounded the shadows along the walls. Lyriana's shoulders eased as she leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes half closing in a moment of rest she had not allowed herself earlier. Evan watched her markings brighten again, reacting to the increase in comfort. Your markings, he said. They always change when something shifts inside you. She opened her eyes. My people read these changes the way you humans read a voice, she explained. They reveal calm, fear, warmth, hesitation. Evan nodded thoughtfully. What do they show now? She lowered her gaze to her wrists, studying the soft violet glow. They show uncertainty, she said. And something else. Something I do not yet have a word for. Evan rested his arms across his knees, leaning forward slightly. Not everything needs a word right away. Lyriana looked up at him again, and this time her expression held no barriers. When I called your name earlier, she said quietly, I did not understand why I reached for you instead of the heater or the doorway, or even the silence. Her voice softened. But now I think it was because you felt steady. The room's warmth settled deeper around them. Evan let out a slow breath. I am here, he said simply. Steady is something I can do. Lyriana held his gaze for a long moment, and the air between them seemed to shift again, not louder or heavier, just clearer. Outside, the storm tapped against the dome with a softer rhythm, as if even the wind knew the moment inside the small room had changed. The storm's pressure against the dome softened into a distant rumble, as if the winds themselves were growing tired. Inside the service room, the heater's glow cast warm, shifting light across the metal panels, wrapping the small space in a steady, comforting pulse. Lyriana's markings shimmered faintly as she watched Evan adjust a loose conduit near the floor. You repair things even when no one sees, she said quietly. Evan tightened the last connector and sat back. If something is broken, it deserves a chance to work again, he replied. That is the job. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing not in suspicion but in deep thought. You speak of broken things with respect, she said, as if they are not lesser for having failed. Evan brushed dust from his gloves. Everyone fails, he said. What matters is what comes after. Lyriana lowered her gaze to her hands, her fingers tracing the glowing lines on her skin. Among my people, failure is not something one returns from easily, she replied. It follows you, marks you. Her voice held a faint tremor that was not weakness, but memory. Evan leaned slightly closer, not touching her, but offering presence. You left for a reason, he said gently. Whatever happened, you walked away from it. That means you were looking for something different. She looked up, meeting his eyes with a steady intensity. I walked away because I was told I no longer belonged, she said. Not because I believed it. Evan absorbed this, letting the quiet stretch without pressure. The heater hummed softly, filling the space where words were not needed. Lyriana exhaled slowly. You humans choose your paths, she continued. My people are born into them. Set from childhood. Duty above desire. Logic above instinct. Survival above choice. That sounds heavy, Evan said. It was what kept us strong, she replied. Until it became something else. Her gaze drifted to the floor, to the faint reflection of the heater's warm light. When I questioned the path, I learned quickly that strength is not always welcome when it challenges the shape of the world. Evan nodded, understanding in a way he did not need to explain. So you walked into the storm, he said. Because staying was not really staying anymore. Lyriana's markings brightened subtly. Yes, she said. And I thought that leaving meant I would owe nothing to anyone. Evan gave a small, thoughtful smile. Then you met me. The stranger with a toolbox. A soft breath slipped from her, close to a quiet laugh. Yes, she said. The one who insisted on offering help without asking why. The storm outside shifted again, its echo rolling across the dome like a low drum. Lyriana's gaze followed the sound, her features steady but reflective. Evan, she said slowly, why do you help me? You do not know what I have done. You do not know who I was before this storm. Evan folded his arms loosely, resting them across his knees. Maybe not, he said, but I know who you are right now. Someone cold, tired, alone, and trying to stand again. That is enough for me. Lyriana closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the words as if they warmed her more deeply than the heater. When she opened them again, there was something gentler in her expression. Your people confuse me, she murmured. Good, Evan replied softly. Confusion means you are thinking, and thinking means you are choosing. She looked at him for a long, steady moment, her markings glowing in patterns that had not appeared earlier. Then perhaps, she began, her voice a whisper, perhaps I am choosing differently now. And in the warm, quiet shelter of that small room, the weight she had been carrying since the moment she left her old life began, piece by piece, to loosen. The storm outside shifted again, the sound dipping into a low, rolling vibration that made the heater's metal frame tremble softly. Evan glanced toward the ceiling, instinctively checking for structural strain, but the room held steady, wrapped in its pocket of warm, flickering light. Lyriana watched him as he observed the panels, her gaze filled with a focus that carried no fear, only awareness. Your instincts react before your words do, she said quietly. You listen to things most people ignore. Evan shrugged gently as he settled back onto the bench. The dome speaks. It complains when the wind pushes too hard. It settles when the pressure drops. You learn its moods after enough shifts. Lyriana tilted her head slightly. And right now, he said, listening a moment longer. It is holding, but it is tired. Her markings rippled faintly, the glow shifting into a pattern he had begun to recognize as thoughtfulness. My people do not read structures this way, she said. We read each other. The rise of breathing, the shift of posture, the changes in light under the skin. Evan nodded. Everyone listens to something. She looked down at her hands, turning them slowly so the glowing lines caught the light. Earlier, she said, when I told you I chose differently now, I did not expect to feel the weight of that choice so quickly. Evan leaned forward slightly, careful not to close the space too much. Does it feel like a heavy choice? She shook her head. Not heavy, just real. When you walked away from me earlier, I realized I was not prepared for the silence your absence would leave. The confession hung gently between them, not dramatic, just honest. Evan let his breath out slowly. I am glad you called my name, he said. It meant you were not facing all this alone. Her gaze lifted, meeting his with a steadiness that had not been present before. Evan, she said softly, I did not call because I feared the storm. I called because, she paused, searching for a word her language perhaps did not carry. Because you felt safe. The heater's glow deepened, warming the edges of the moment. Evan nodded once, accepting the meaning without pushing it further. Then I am glad I stayed, he said. A faint tremor shivered through the dome's outer plates, not dangerous, but noticeable. Liriana's eyes drifted toward the doorway. When the storm ends, she said, what comes next? We leave this room. Evan answered simply. We get you somewhere warm. Somewhere stable. One step at a time. She considered this, her markings brightening in small, pulsing waves. In my world, she said, one step was never allowed to be just one step. Every move meant something to someone. Every decision had a cost. Evan offered a quiet smile. Then maybe it is time you take a step that belongs only to you. Silence followed, soft and full. Liriana's eyes softened as she looked at him. You speak of choice as if it is a simple thing. It is not, Evan said. But staying alive for the next hour is. That is where we start. Her shoulders relaxed, the tension she carried earlier dissolving a little more. She drew a slow breath and released it. Evan, she said again, her voice lower. I did not expect to meet someone who saw me without asking for explanations. I figured you would give me the ones that mattered, he replied. Her gaze lingered on him, clear and steady. Then here is one, she said. I am not just leaving my past. It may try to follow me. Evan's expression did not shift into fear or worry. It simply remained steady, as it had from the beginning. Then it will have to get through the storm, he said. And you are not facing that alone either. Liriana exhaled slowly, her markings glowing with a soft, warm pulse that mirrored the rhythm of the heater. Outside, the storm eased just a little more, as if listening to the quiet truth settling inside the room. The storm's rhythm softened into long, uneven sighs against the dome, each one fading a little sooner than the last. Evan listened carefully, tracking the subtle drop in pressure. It is easing, he said quietly. Another 30 minutes, and we should be able to move. Liriana lifted her gaze toward the ceiling, her markings reflecting the heater's warm glow in slow, thoughtful pulses. Your storms behave like living things, she murmured. Temperamental, loud, unpredictable. So do people. Evan replied with a small smile. At least storms do not pretend otherwise. A faint breath escaped her, almost a soft laugh. But it faded quickly as something else occupied her thoughts. She shifted on the bench, her posture straightening with a quiet resolve. Evan, she said, you should know what might come when the storm clears. He turned fully to her, steady as always. I am listening. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers relaxed but deliberate. My people will search for me, she said. Not because they value me, but because I was expected to fulfill a duty. When I left, I did not just walk away. I walked out of a path chosen for me. Evan took this in without any sign of alarm. And they would come after you for that. Not out of anger, she said. Out of tradition. Out of a belief that no one steps outside the role they were born into. Her voice grew quieter. I am not certain what they will do if they find me. But I know they will not understand why I left. Evan leaned back slightly, understanding settling through him like a slow pulse. And if they come here? She looked at him then, her violet eyes bright and unguarded. Then they will expect me to return. They will expect me to be the version of myself that fits their world. The heater hummed, wrapping the small room in a warm shelter that suddenly felt fragile. Evan folded his hands loosely. And what version do you want to be? Liriana's markings shifted into a warm, steady glow. One that chooses, she said. One that is not bound by fear of disappointing a tradition. A soft silence followed, full of quiet truths. Evan let his breath out slowly. If your past shows up, he said, then we face it. Not as something you owe, but as something you get to answer on your terms. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the warm light. You speak as if the choice is simple, she said. It is not simple, he replied gently. But it is yours. Her gaze softened. Why do you believe in my choice more than I do? Because, Evan said quietly. You were strong enough to walk into a storm. That tells me you can walk into anything else life throws at you. Lyriana lowered her gaze, her markings pulsing with a gentle glow that seemed almost like gratitude. The dome rumbled again, but this time the sound was softer, more distant. The worst of the storm had passed. Evan stood and walked to the door panel, testing the manual release. The mechanism responded, smoother than before, offering a sliver of corridor light. We will move soon, he said, but only when you are ready. Lyriana rose slowly, steadying herself with her hand on the wall. The warmth in her markings brightened, casting soft reflections across the room. Evan, she said, her voice low, steady, and carrying a truth she had not spoken until now. If they come, I do not want to face them alone. Evan nodded, something resolute settling behind his eyes. You will not. And, in that small, warm room, the truth between them shifted into something unspoken but unmistakably real, stronger than the fading storm outside. The service room door slid open with a softened hiss, letting a thin ribbon of cooler air slip inside. The storm outside had weakened to a gentle groan, faint and tired, like a giant settling into sleep. Evan stepped just beyond the threshold and looked down the corridor, testing the stability of the floor panels with a careful heel press. The dome held steady now. The danger had thinned into silence. Behind him, Lyriana rose from the bench, her movements slower but more certain, her markings glowing with a steady warmth that had not been present when he first found her beneath the broken dome. She paused at the doorway, taking in the corridor with cautious eyes. It feels different, she murmured, as if the world exhaled. Storms do that, Evan replied. They let go all at once. She stepped beside him, her posture composed but carrying a quiet readiness. The heater's glow faded behind them as the door eased shut, leaving the two of them in the soft, dim light of the hallway. Their footsteps echoed in a slow rhythm as they moved deeper into the east wing. The silence between them had shifted. It no longer carried the weight of unfamiliarity, but something steadier, something earned. Lyriana walked with her head slightly lifted, sensing the air, listening to the returning hum of the dome's systems. Evan, she said, her voice calm. If my people find me, they will expect stillness. Agreement. Obedience. Evan looked at her, the corridor lights reflecting against her silver-violet skin. And what do you expect of yourself? She stopped walking. Her markings pulsed softly, glowing along the lines of her wrists and forearms like constellations forming and reforming in silence. I expect, she said slowly, to decide my own direction, even if it is only one step at a time. Evan nodded. Then we follow that step. Her gaze softened, a wordless acknowledgement of something she had not yet learned how to name. They continued forward until they reached a junction where a panel window overlooked the outer shell of the dome. Through it, the storm clouds drifted apart, unveiling a stretch of quiet sky tinged with muted silver. Lyriana lifted her hand to the glass. The reflection staring back at her was softer than the one she had known before the storm, less guarded, less shaped by expectation. I thought leaving meant losing everything, she said. But now it feels like I am finding something instead. Evan stood beside her, close enough for her to feel steadiness radiating from him, but not close enough to take the choice from her. Sometimes finding begins with walking through something uncomfortable, he said. Storms, doubt, old memories. She looked at him then, her eyes carrying a quiet clarity. And sometimes, she said, it begins with someone who does not walk away. A gentle stillness settled over the corridor. The fading storm cast a pale glow across the window, framing her reflection beside his. Her markings brightened, not in warning or fear, but in calm acceptance. Evan, she whispered, her voice almost blending with the soft hum of the lights. When I called your name, I did not realize it would change the path ahead. Evan met her gaze, steady and unwavering. It changed mine too. Lyriana exhaled, the sound soft and full of meaning. She lowered her hand from the window, her posture unfolding with newfound resolve. Then let us walk whatever path comes, she said. Not as who I was, but as who I choose to be. Evan nodded, offering a gentle tilt of his head. I am with you. Outside, the last cloud drifted away, leaving the first quiet beam of light to press against the dome. It cast a soft reflection across Liriana's eyes, one that flickered with the hint of a new beginning, steady and silent, shared between two worlds now moving forward together.